Bella here. I'm 23 years old, and I have big dreams of becoming a talent architect. I was born in a pretty normal family. Don't get me wrong, I adore my family a lot, but they don't understand my deep passion. I didn't want to stay in my dreamy childhood town and have some ordinary job. I wanted to design amazing houses and eco-friendly hotels. I studied super hard on my degree, and it all worked out, as this major architect company called the Star-Cross Estate Company offered me a job. And better still, it meant I got to continue staying in sunny California. OMG, talk about amazing! Well, at least I thought it was down to my hard work and talents. You see, my boyfriend Ed also works for the Star-Cross Estate. I met Ed at a college party a few years ago. At that time, I was still a student and he was an alumnus. We bonded over our love of modern architecture and ecological buildings. It took over a year for me to build up the courage to confess my feelings to him. We were at this cafe near college, and I was so nervous when I mumbled it out. Luckily, he figured out what I was trying to say, so he held my hand, then said,
"Yes, Bella, I'm such an amateur when it comes to matters of the heart, but I feel the same about you."
I fell madly in love with him, and being around Ed, well, it was when I was at my happiest. Then, after my graduation ceremony, I mentioned how I wanted to find a job nearby so I could stay in Cali and be close to him. He said there was a position going at his workplace, and if I gave him a copy of my CV, he'd pass it on. He often told me that he could hook me up with a job there when I graduated, but I just thought he was joking. I mean, he was just some intern, right? It was not like he could help me to get a job at a large company like the Star-Cross Estate. Anyway, I still gave it to him to find a chance. Then a week later, I got called in for an interview. Then later that day, they called me back saying I'd got the job. I almost screamed when I was running to tell him in excitement, but he just smiled and said,
"You didn't trust me back then, did you? Congrats, my new colleague."
I was over the moon and couldn't wait to start my next chapter. On my first day, I was super nervous, but Ed said I could go in with him. As we walked in, the receptionist looked at Ed and said, "Morning, Mr. Stratford. Your father would like to talk to you in his office." What? I stared at him open-mouthed. He quickly explained to me how he was not only the head of the project management department, but his father owned the company. I'd been dating him for over a year, and he never thought fit to tell me this. It was true that he didn't need to tell me about his family, but this fact was too overwhelming. I had a job in the design department of a prestigious architecture company. And yes, I was the boss's son's girlfriend. This made me kinda awkward. I'd always believed that I could get this job because the company saw my ability, not because the one who introduced me was the heir. But soon, I surely would show that I deserved to be there, regardless of who I was dating. But everything was not that easy. Word soon got around the office that I was Ed's girlfriend, and I was constantly getting dirty looks from other people. Once, I was in the toilet cubicle and overheard some girls talking about me. One girl said, "Talk about favoritism. The new girl in the design department didn't even experience one day as a trainee." Then another girl said, "That bumpkin wouldn't survive for long. Maybe she only lasts a week. Wanna bet?" Of course no. Who will we bet with when we're on the same side? So, hello from the other side. I just couldn't hold it and walked out to see who was bad-mouthing me. And I saw that one of the girls was Diane, who worked in the sales department. What made it worse was she'd always been super nice to me up until this point. I could see their funny faces when they saw me there. "Don't act like that. You are still good girls, not talking behind my back, but my front," I said, then left them frozen inside. I thought that would be the end of it, but it turns out it was just the beginning. Since that day, Diane sneered and made nasty comments whenever I passed her, such as, "Yuck, have you seen the state of her shoes?" And, "Someone should tell her frizzy hair is not a trend." I tried my best to ignore her, but then one time, I got a really strange email from a customer telling me how she was conflicted if she should go with my design or not, after what my colleague told her about me. It turns out, Diane had told this customer that I was an immoral person who stole other people's designs and tried passing them off as my own. Saying snide comments about me was one thing, but bad-mouthing my work? Now, That was a step too far. I waited until Diane came out of her meeting, then I pulled her aside and said, "Look, you can't go around saying I steal other designers' work and use them as my own. I've worked hard to get here, and saying stuff like that is not fair." She snorted. "Yeah, right. You're only here because you went crying to your boyfriend for a job. I'm here because I'm good at what I do." "Whatever. You're not good enough, and he'll see that eventually and choose me instead." What? Suddenly, this all made sense. She was being a mean girl because she had a crush on my boyfriend, and she was jealous he was with me, not her. So I kept my cool when I said to her, "If your problem is Ed, and you think you're good enough to deserve him instead of me, you should focus on him only. Don't change your arrow direction to me and my work. You'll get nothing." Diane seemed really mad. So, okay, the one who should get mad was me, not her. Luckily for me, my boss Jim wasn't like Diane. Instead, he was a really nice guy who didn't treat me differently just because of who my boyfriend was. One time, I was snooping through his profile, purely for project purposes, and I discovered he went to the same college as me, just at different times. I mentioned this to him, and he smiled and said,
"Yeah, that's where I met your boyfriend. He's a good friend of mine."
Oh, I hated the word boyfriend at work, so I just ignored it and changed the subject. But anyway, it was good news, right? Jim was Ed's best friend, so at least I could trust him and learn from his work experience. Since I'd worked at Starcross Estate, I often had lunch with Ed, Jim, and Ellie. Ellie was Ed's half-sister, and also his assistant. She was really sweet and ridiculously beautiful. The way she talked and acted made me overwhelmed. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that she was such the cleverest and gentlest girl I'd ever met. Gradually, I spent more time after work with Ed, Jim, and Ellie. We usually spent all dinner time discussing work. To me, 3 of them were the colleagues that I always wanted to work with. But, except business things, I didn't know a lot about Jim and Ellie's personal life. Ellie was sweet and all, but she was also a kind of private person and somehow distant from others. Except for Ed, of course. And about Jim, he even had never been close to me and only seemed to talk about work stuff. They were both close to Ed, so I wanted to make friends. But, well, maybe they just saw me as their colleague. As for work, yeah, that was going pretty great. But then in true mean girl fashion, Diane struck again. One day, she stormed over to my desk, slammed a folder full of my designs down onto it, and started yelling at me. "You've not followed the customer's requirements, and they're not happy." I replied, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'll fix it right away." "It's not good enough? You're clearly not good enough to be here. Your work's sloppy, and you don't listen." I forced a smile back and said, "Okay, I'll fix it." She didn't let me finish my words, but just rudely walked away while all of my colleagues were looking at me suspiciously. This whole incident made me feel super deflated. I didn't understand it. I reread the design requirements through and had never seen those orders. Hadn't I? I tried to forget about it all and enjoy my evening, as I was out for dinner with Ed, Jim, and Ellie. We were just quietly enjoying the meal as usual when Ed and Ellie had unexpected work pop up and had to leave. Jim gave me a lift home, and I thought it would be a super awkward and silent journey. But then he asked me if I was okay about what Diane had done to me. I didn't expect him to care about my problem. I always thought that Jim was a stone cold who cared about nothing but work. But turned out, he was so delicate and caring. Then he continued,
"As a head of my department, I'm sorry that I can't step in to defend you if the problem isn't big enough. Because, it could make the situation worse, and you might suffer more from everyone's gossip."
"I understand," I honestly said.
"I think you're a very talented designer, and Ed's girlfriend or not, there's no doubt that you're the best person for the job. If I was you, I'd carry on doing what you're doing and show them all how deserving you are to be there."
Jim smiled and patted my shoulder when he said that. I really appreciated Jim's words. I knew he was a nice guy, but he seemed so work-focused and could come off kinda cold, so it was good to see another side to him. I took his advice, and I put all my motivation into creating the best work possible. I read through all the job requirements I was sent at least 3 times and jotted down notes so no one could catch me out again. And I often spent my breaks in the office learning more about the company or discussing architecture with Jim. I was finally beginning to feel like I belonged there, and that my colleagues were beginning to believe this too. Little did I know, another storm was waiting for me. That day, when I was about to leave work, an email from Diane popped up. I opened it thinking it was work-related, but no. It said, "Break up with Ed right now before everyone knows what a loser you are. He loves me, not you, and I have proof." Attached to the email were a bunch of pictures. Seriously? Could this actually be happening? My heart was pounding like crazy, and my hand was shaking as I clicked on the first image.